I'm warming up a bunch of different samples to show you guys, and then you'll be able to compare that to my formula, which is going to be an open source material, so like anyone around the world can make it. I am still developing it. It's got some kinks I need to work out, but it's pretty much ready to go. It's totally usable. There's just like all these possibilities that you can do with it, and there's just not really anything like it right now on the market. It's hard to explain until you see. So I'll be getting into that very soon. So this one on the right here is actually made out of Cx5. So this is the material I used to use. This is Cx5S, which is for soft. There's two versions, soft and hard. And basically, this stuff you can't buy it anymore. The guy who creates it, I'm not sure what happened. It sounds like he had a bit of either like a health issue or like his manufacturing, something went wrong with that. I don't really want to speculate because that's not really my business. But it was kind of a shame to see that his stuff isn't around anymore, because his is like sort of the gold standard, to me at least, of what a good sculpting material is for making like miniatures and toys. It's just so versatile. It's hard when it's cool, but once you heat it up a little bit, it's very soft. And you could say the same thing about a lot of other materials like Castilene and Monster Clay Hard. But in my opinion, they just don't really have the same qualities as this stuff. It comes in this sort of like breakable brick. So what you would do is you would break this into chunks. And because he makes a hard and a soft version, you can actually mix them together to get the exact hardness and softness that you want. Now again, this stuff is not available for purchase anymore. I think about a year or two ago, he had started some kind of Kickstarter for like a 3D printing filament version of this. I was actually really excited to see that. But something happened, I don't know what, and people are still waiting on him. I hope he's doing okay, Adam, if you're watching this somewhere. But yeah, his material to me is the gold standard of what a wax should be for sculpting. It's got like a very crispness to it. Like, you see I'm just scratching at my fingernails, and it's leaving like little scratches, but I'm not really digging into the surface at all. Now if I did that with monster clay, immediately I'm getting, particles that are coming off. So that just shows you how hard this stuff is that with the same amount of force, like this is just getting scratched slightly, and this can all be taken care of. Like you can just smooth that out, and you can either use one of these. This is just a softback sanding sponge that I've cut into a smaller strip. Sand it like this, and that'll like remove most of the scratches, and then you can go even finer, and then you can even he made like a smoothing solvent actually for this material, so like you could get it almost like glass smooth. The Cx5 smoothing solvent, it was actually made to be extremely non-toxic, so it's like safe for your skin, and it's all like natural ingredients. So that's sort of the main benefit that I'm going to be showing you between Cx5 and the other products out there, is that he created a completely all natural, non-toxic material versus these guys. I mean it's non-toxic, it's safe, it's not like it's like dangerous to touch, but there are definitely petroleum based products in them, and I just did not want to go that route. Here, let's use the waxer. And again, you don't need to have like an electric waxer for this. In fact, let's not even use this. I'm going to use an alcohol lamp, which is just it's just denatured alcohol in there. So the idea is that you would heat up your metal sculpting tools, because this stuff is so hard that you can't really move enough material just with your hands. Like I cannot mess with this. So like you see, like no matter how many times I'm like, that detail is not getting lost. Versus this stuff, you do it enough times, eventually you're gonna start messing up the surface and deforming the details that you had. Which again is good if you're making like really big sculptures. You would not use this stuff to make a gigantic sculpture. It would just take too long. Once you've heated the material, then you see you can like dig in. You know what? Let's compare that with Castilene. Okay, let me grab some. All right, so I had some just sort of like heating up over there. Right off the bat, when you look at it, can you see, focus? Can you see those little like microcrystal textures? I don't know what that is exactly, but it gives it a very crumbly sort of texture. I don't know if you can tell. It's not smooth, right? It's not smooth like the monster clay is. I think this is paraffin wax that they have in their wax. And that's one of those petroleum based waxes I was talking to you about. And it's just a very brittle wax. I just don't like working with it. You see, like, it's just falling apart. Like, it should not be doing this. It's like dough that's like too dry. I don't know how else to explain it. You can imagine, like, if you're trying to work on something and you're trying to give life to your form and you're trying to like manipulate the clay, if it just crumbles on you like this, like, it's gonna take you forever to get where you want. It kind of smells like, what does this smell? Oatmeal. It smells like oatmeal. I don't know why. It smells like oatmeal, which is not a bad thing. Now, I wouldn't go like sniffing the fumes directly, because if this does have petroleum-based waxes in it, which I'm pretty sure it does, you probably don't really want to be smelling those fumes. So again, it was pretty good while it was warm, but immediately it's like already turning back to that crumbly texture. So it's not bad. You can definitely work around this. But if I'm going to be paying, for a 2.5 pound block of this stuff and then just working with it for like a couple hours, I feel like I would get really tired of this quality. That's definitely microcrystalline. Okay, so this, I can tell just from like all the like experiments I've run, this definitely has microcrystalline wax in it, because I have this sort of, you can't see it, but there's like a sticky residue on my fingertips. It's very, if you've ever worked with Chavant clay, you know what I'm talking about, right? It makes your fingers really sticky. Now, does that bother everyone? Not everyone, but it's definitely something to look out for, because the longer you're working with this stuff, right, the more you're gonna notice these little things. I can't really smooth this with my fingers the way I could with the monster clay. It just falls apart. There's no way. Here's some much warmer monster clay. Ooh, that is smooth. That is like chocolatey smooth. This feels like microcrystalline wax as well. Not that it's like leaving a bunch of residue on my fingers. I think that might be because there's oil in it, and the oil helps like subtract that quality. It is way better in terms of consistency. So you can imagine if you're working on like a very big sculpture, this is going to help you move a lot of material in a much faster pace. Yeah, it's definitely not crumbling. It's not leaving material behind like the other one did, but it still is kind of sticking to me. But you can rectify that just by sort of touching it with like a bigger piece and just letting it like clump together. So it wants to stick to itself. That's a good sign. The Castilene didn't really want to stick to itself. It just kept falling apart on me. This stuff holds heat for a really long time, and that might not be good if you are trying to work on a small piece, because if it stays that soft for like the whole time that you're working with it, you'll never be able to achieve sharper like details like these and get those hard edges that you're looking for. But for a large piece, you probably would be able to, because large pieces you would probably be working on like a different area at a different time, and you could let like parts of it cool as it's working. So this, again, monster clay is really good for like large scale stuff, and I've definitely seen people work with it and make smaller stuff. It's just, this would not be my go-to, just because it's a little too soft for my tastes. Now we're gonna go to Cx5. Okay, so this is Cx5 Hard. So this is soft and this is hard. With waxes, you definitely have to work a little bit hotter, but you're not burning yourself. For instance, this is 125 degrees Fahrenheit is the working temperature. That sounds like a lot, but if you think about how humans are at, what is it, like 96.8 or something, it's actually not that much more. Another way you can do it is you can use like a wire tool to like scoop it out. You could use like a spatula, but I like the wire tool because then I can just sort of like, with a spatula it sometimes gets a little bit more stuck than that. So you can see, even though it's wax, like the Castilene, it's like way more elastic, right? It's definitely not as elastic as monster clay is, but it's really close. And so you get the benefit of having something that's soft and workable while it's warm, and then when it's cool, you're gonna be able to get those hard details that you're looking for that you just cannot get with the softer material. Obviously, as it's cooling down, it's starting to lose some of that elasticity, but you can easily just set up like a heat lamp next to you and just like aim it sort of at your sculpture, and just like keep it on while you're working the contours of the shape and doing like the larger pieces of the sculpting. But if you're making small things, like you probably won't even need to do that. So the benefit of this material over things like epoxy clays is that with epoxy clays, they will never be able to return to this elastic state, right? You could never rework them again. Once they're cured, they're hard forever. And if you want to change something, you're probably going to have to cut it off, and then put like a new piece and resculpt it. That may not be an issue for people if you're really good about working with it. Some epoxy clays have a really long working time. Personally, I take a couple days to make things because like sometimes I'll wake up the next day and I'm like, that doesn't look right at all. Now, if that was epoxy clay, you can imagine it's like by then it's too late. You can't really change it anymore. Even if it has a really long working time, like a whole day is usually, I think, like the limit. But with wax and other like wax-based clays, you can just always rework them. Anyway, I'm gonna let this heat up again. Even though this is the soft version, it's still quite hard. And it can hold detail really well. Like when you scratch it, that is super sharp. Like there is no what's the word for it? There's like no flaking, there's no splintering. It's just what you carved out. Now say I tried doing that with the monster clay. So immediately you can see on the edges that sort of like rolled up edge. It's not a sharp edge. And you can see like actually I'm like pushing a little too hard, so it's like getting stuck. But as you work with it, you're gonna, if say you wanted to make that a hard edge, you're gonna have to go back and just like very slightly either push it down and I don't know, maybe use a wire tool to sort of scrape that. But it's like it takes forever to get it back to like a hard edge. That's sort of like the main difference I wanted to show you between sculpting with clays and waxes. Now I'm going to show you Relix. This is the hard version of Relix. And it's very similar to Cx5. And as the hard version, I've formulated it so that, I don't know if you can hear that, but this is like really hard. So like, it's actually probably possible for you to just like, you can probably machine this stuff if you have like a lathe or a CNC. It's almost like you're carving plastic. But if I heat it up, so that's cool, heated. Now, this is one of the kinks that I still have to work out of my material. I don't know if you can see the coloration. It looks worse on camera, but it's actually not that bad. So this happens because it's a little bit of like a chemistry thing, which I'm not like I don't have a scientific background, but I did read up on this to try to explain it the best I can. There's a quality of materials, it's called polarity. And basically it refers to the way the molecules are aligned. Depending on the polarity, it'll behave very differently. So like say oil and water, right? You notice how oil always like sort of sits on top of water, and you can never really mix oil and water together. That's because oil is non-polar while water is polar. That happens with wax as well. Wax is non-polar and the pigments in it are polar. So they don't really like to combine that well, which is why sometimes you'll see the mix turn to like this weird tie-dye mess. But there's nothing wrong with it. It's not gone bad. It looks like it went bad, but it didn't. All you have to do is sort of mix it up again. I've been messing around a lot, and it's still taking some time, but I'm very close to figuring out a proper dispersing agent. And a dispersing agent is something you would use to help the polar and non-polar parts of your mixture combine better. So a good analogy of this is like when you wash dishes, you use dish soap with water to wash like the grease stains off the dishes and all that. And that's because while water is polar and oil and greases, all that, those are non-polar. The soap molecules are actually made of, they are both polar and non-polar. So it's like they can sort of latch on to both the soap, both the water and the oil, and then help them combine better so that you can get them off the plate. So that's what a dispersing agent does. It helps create a more uniform suspension. And so I am still working on that, but I'm very close to getting a good a good workaround for that. But it doesn't really affect the way the material works. It's just sort of like a surface quality thing, like you would just see it. It's just an aesthetic thing. It doesn't actually affect the material. It behaves a lot like the Cx5 Hard, and as you can see, it carves really well. So it'll hold detail. And then if you have like a heated tool, this is an electric waxer, you can go in and then you can like mess around with all that and just like sort of work it. So anyone who's ever worked with Cx5 will know just how similar my wax is compared to his. The idea is that you would work with this stuff, you'd work with it warm, get the sort of rough shape of your sculpt, and then once it cools down, you can work on the details. But the great thing about it is that you can always warm it up again and keep working with it. You can stick it in some really hot water, let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then it'll be like so soft and pliable that you can almost actually bend the joints like an action figure. And so that gives you like the most flexibility. You can always go back and reshape your sculpt, and it will never like fully harden on you. So you'll need to make a mold of it and everything, but it's reusable. You know, you can make as many sculptures as you want out of it over and over. You just got to melt it down. I'm going to put it back under the heat lamp. And this is my soft version of Relix. So I formulated this to behave a lot more like clay, but it still retains the hardness of wax in its cooled state. So it's a little bit softer, but it's still hard enough that it holds detail. It carves really smooth. It's actually really nice. And you're not getting any of that flaking on the edges. I'm going to show you now with the sort of melted down. And again, you're seeing that discoloration, but I'm working that out. And it really does not affect the way the material works. It's really just like an aesthetic thing. You just have to sort of mix it up again, and it'll return to like a more consistent color. So immediately you can see the difference is that this is way more malleable, and it behaves a lot like the Monster Clay does. And you don't see any discoloration as you're working with it, because what you're doing when you knead it like that, you're sort of like helping the different ingredients disperse better and create a more uniform suspension again. So again, like as you work with it, like that's not going to be an issue. And it'll take a little while. I'm just going to let that sit there, let it sort of cool down again. This is Relix Hard and this is soft. And in fact, I'm going to speed this up with a little trick. You can use like a cleaning duster. If you put it upside down and spray, it'll actually like super cool what you're working on. Just make sure you're pointing this away from your face, because I think this stuff lets out like toxic fumes or something. What the heck? Oh. Okay. Just let that sort of return back to room temperature instead of being this super cold state. Because oh, see, like it's very brittle. So the hard version of Relix is very brittle. Even if it wasn't like super chilled like this, it probably would break like that. So you have to be a little bit more careful when you're working with this stuff, because it has a tendency to fracture. Again, that's just sort of what happens when you want a material that can hold finer detail and want it to be harder. It's not going to be as flexible. It won't be able to take impacts that well. As long as you don't like drop it on the floor or something, it'll be fine. Like you can work with it in your hands. In fact, this is a Cx5 Hard, and you know, that's like, it's not going to break on you that easily. So that's what this is sort of emulating, is that stuff. Now with the soft one, that feels like room temperature. It's still a little bit cooler though. Alright, I'm just going to break it. Okay. It's got some flex to it. It broke a little bit right there. But compared to that stuff, which... Oh, actually, maybe because my hands are warm. Yeah, so my hands are warm, so it's like making it a little bit flexible again. So that's good. But this stuff is definitely way more flexible. Like, even though it was super chill just then, I can already start bending it. But it'll hold its shape. It's not gonna like bounce back or something. This is Relix Soft. And so in this sort of warmed state, you can really, like, you have enough time to sort of build out your shapes. And again, you can always warm them up again and keep working with it. It won't ever fully cure on you. You'll be able to melt it down and reuse it as many times as you want. I think you guys get the gist of it. The main issue I had with the stuff that's already out there is that it was either too soft, even at the most hard version that was sold. It's too soft for what I need. It may be perfect for what you're doing, but if you're like me and you're trying to make small scale miniatures and things like that, you really need a very hard material that keeps its form. With this stuff, you'll get close, but it's just too soft for that type of work. It's great for doing larger things, you know. Castilene, again, it's great, but not really what I was looking for, and it has some issues with it that I don't really need to go into right now. But it just, as you can see, it just doesn't have the same consistency. And I like when you're working with a sculpture, you just don't want to really be spending time troubleshooting what you're doing. You just want to get to the creative part of the process. And yeah, with the Cx5, like, it's just not available anymore, which is really too bad because a lot of people, including me, really love this stuff. I've come really close to replicating this formula. I don't know if mine's better or if it's worse, but there's really like no difference at this point between mine and his. So I'll be showing you how to make my version. And it's going to be all natural ingredients. There's not going to be any petroleum based products in it. For those of you who don't know, microcrystalline wax was developed like in the 1950s or something for museum and conservatory work for as a substitute for beeswax, because beeswax over time can sometimes become a little bit acidic, which can hurt like really old, centuries old paintings. It's not going to affect, you know, your wax or your clay or anything like that, but for like conservatory work, they just really need like high standards, I guess. So that's why they developed microcrystalline wax, which is a petroleum based product. It's very cheap to produce, so that helps put the price down, but I don't think it comes anywhere near like natural waxes. You know, people can argue that point, but that's just how I see it. These are like things that you really can't tell unless you're working with it with your own hands. I've tried to show you as much as possible, but like I can't actually express to you like the stickiness or whatever of things. It's really up to you, right? If you just want something that's easily sourced, you can just buy, you know, whatever is available closest to you. But if you're like me and you have a very particular need for a certain type of material, then I think Relix is going to be really great, because I'm going to be making not just, you know, Relix Soft and Relix Hard. I'm also planning to create a good formula for lost wax casting. So like that's the type of, you need a type of wax that can melt completely out of a mold, like a plaster mold, so that you can then pour metal into it. So I'm going to be working on a wax that's really good for that. I also kind of made this like really sticky wax that almost is like spider webs or cobwebs. So like say you're doing like a Halloween sculpture or something, it would be really cool for that. I'm also working on a smoothing solvent of my own formula. So like, I don't know if you can tell, but on here, this hasn't been smoothed with any solvents or anything yet. So you have like little bumps in the surface and all that, versus this one, which I used a smoothing solvent that I'm still testing. It's not perfect yet. This looked a lot less smooth before I did that. So it's going to take a lot of that extra work out of it. And again, that formula will be made available for public as well. And I'm going to look at other things that might be easier for people to get if they can just buy something to use right off the bat. but my goal is to make everything out of all natural ingredients. That means, you know, nothing that has any petroleum based products in it, nothing that has to be like synthesized with like a crazy amount of pollutants and things like that. I just want to make something that's very safe for people to use and is accessible to them wherever they are. I'm just starting out with this stuff. I don't really know what the demand is like for it. That's another reason why I decided not to release it as an actual product. I felt like there's enough stuff on the market already that people can just buy whatever, right? But for people like me who are interested in learning how to make their own things and interested in knowing more about like the materials and how they work, this could be really useful because you can change up the formulas and make all kinds of things. You could probably make something very close to monster clay using my formula of Relix Soft and just like going a little bit more heavy with Beeswax and some other additives. It's still soft. I can still do that. That's really great. I'm really not trying to replace anyone else's product on the market. I think that you have to try everything first and then sort of decide on what you like and what works for you. And it's taken me like a long time to figure that out for myself. So if I can provide formulas for people to just buy like the raw ingredients of things and then they can make their own versions of everything, it's just going to save them a lot of money in the long run, at least. You definitely have to put in some investment to buy like the equipment to melt things down and the ingredients, right? You have to buy those in bulk. You know, with the formulas, you can then use all that stuff and just make yourself as many different materials as you would need. Probably like all the one, like this brick, there's actually like 2 more blocks that it came with. And I've had this for like 5-6 years maybe. I still haven't used it up, you know? It's crazy. Now again, my volume of work is very different than someone in like a commercial field. But I really think that if you make it yourself and you have that knowledge, right? It's like saying, teach a man, or don't give a man a fish, or what is it? Oh, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man how to fish, he'll, you know, eat for his life. Whatever that's saying. So I'm trying to spread that knowledge so that you'll never like have to worry about any material going out of business. You'll never have to worry about not being able to get what you need to create the materials, to create the sculptures and ideas. When I first started trying to get back into sculpting this year, and I found out that this material was no longer available for purchase, I was like, oh crap, like once I run out of this, what's going to happen, right? I didn't want it to come to that, which is why I started developing the formulas myself. And so once I, you know, publish all this, people will be able to do it around the world. And it's just super versatile. You can make any hardness just by changing the ratio of ingredients a little bit. In fact, this is a little shaving of a 50-50 mix between Relix Soft and Relix Hard. So like I took an equal amount of Relix Hard and I mixed it with Relix Soft, and then this is just a little piece from something, and you can see like it's almost like a plastic film. It's crazy. Because it has the hard Relix mixed into it, it's capable of getting that like super smooth sheen and it has that curvability. But because it has the other half mixed with Relix Soft, it retains like all that flexibility. So this is really good for, say, like you're making a sculpture of like drapery, capes. Maybe you're making like a book, like a sculpture of a book. You can make the pages out of this. And it's just crazy that it holds that shape without breaking. But it's still like, my fingers are not able to mess with it. It's elastic too. It returns back to its original shape, so you don't have to worry about it like drooping over time, as long as it's kept in like room temperature. It's really like plastic, but it's not. It's all natural, non-toxic ingredients. So again, tonight we compared Relix to all these different types of products. We got Cx5, we have Monster Clay, we have Castilene, and then we have Relix. So we tried comparing everything, and I'm like giving you as much information as possible so that you know what to expect from each type of material. It's really up to you to decide what you're comfortable working with. I just happen to really like wax, like that just behaves a certain way, and it just works really well for making small scale sculptures. Yeah, like I'm excited to show you guys how to work with it more like in real time, so you can make resin copies of your toys. So yeah, I think I'll end the stream here. This is the first stream from the Twitch channel, and I hope to do this a little bit more. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.